Many centuries ago, there was an ancient hero named Ihiko. Through his determination and strength, this hero saved countless lives and cemented himself as a legendary figure among gods and men. However, the thing about heroes is that they often pass the torch to new heroes, with their legends serving as inspiration to inspire a new generation. However, Ihiko wasn't like this at all. In fact, he refused to let go of his role and instead attempted to live on forever. Many tried to get in his way, but Ihiko had the right skills and powers to ensure they could maintain his role no matter the opposition. However, because Ihiko has lived so long, he's become so egotistical, so blinded by his own self-worth, that everything in reality itself has become worthless to him. Things are not even worth acknowledging. This mindset is perfectly represented with his power, which we'll call irreversible destruction. Think of Ihiko like the reader, who's read every story in existence. Because of this, most narratives or twists are so boring that we refuse to acknowledge them, no matter how well put together. We as a result, and in turn Ihiko, seek fresh experiences to have any kind of impact on us. Now take this belief into the context of a nullifying defensive ability, and begin to see why Ihiko has the most powerful defensive power in fiction, with no drawbacks. So in this video, let's explain what exactly Ihiko's power can do, and how it compares to other negating powers from fiction. Keep in mind though that I'm not saying that the other negating powers in this video are weaker or worse, but in terms of all the sheer benefits it provides with little to no drawbacks, Ihiko is the best. Let's begin by explaining the alternatives to Ihiko's power. Anti-magic, like the name implies, is a flowing black energy that destroys and cancels out magic the minute it comes in contact with it. However, pure anti-magic energy or anti-energy cannot always do this on its own. While it does slowly drain the mana of anyone it touches, that isn't very useful by itself. Instead, it uses certain mediums like objects to channel its power more precisely, as the swords, for example, are its preferred ways of utilizing anti-magic. The anti-magic swords can slice through and pierce through magic, which nullifies them. It doesn't matter if it's a projectile or barrier. Once a sword pierces or slices the spell, it will be instantly nullified. Dazai has the power to nullify any ability with his own ability, no longer human. When Dazai makes contact with an ability user, no longer human will activate, and whatever ability he's facing will immediately be nullified. This works on any ability, no matter how powerful it is. This basically means that Dazai is immune to any and all abilities in the Bungo Stray Dogs world, as none of them will even touch him, let alone damage him. If Dazai were to touch an ability, it wouldn't even be the specific attack that will be nullified. Instead, parts of the attack that aren't even near him will be nullified as well. His power will function even under multiple layers of clothing. In fact, if Dazai were to touch an object like a pole, and another ability user were to touch that same pole, their abilities will be nullified. Basically, any object Dazai's skin comes in contact with will extend their reach of no longer human. No longer human is active at all times, making it impossible to sneak attack him. The Imagine Breaker is a supernatural power connected to Kamijo Toma's right hand. It is connected to a phase of reality devoid of supernatural phenomena, and acts as a reference point or lifeline, fixing the world when magicians overly destroyed it. When the Imagine Breaker makes contact with a supernatural power, it immediately negates it, breaking it as if it were an illusion. The Imagine Breaker, when it makes contact with something deemed supernatural, is simply restoring reality to how it's supposed to be in the pure world, immediately annihilating the supernatural ability in seconds. The Imagine Breaker also passively nullifies any blessings like luck, explaining why he always ends up in unfortunate situations. Now that you got the gist, let's explain how Ihiko's power is potentially better. Ihiko possesses a unique ability known as irreversible destruction. This power allows him to nullify any attack or ability regardless of its nature or potency. When confronted with an attack, Ihiko can simply choose to not acknowledge it, and as a result, the attack, even if it makes contact, gets instantly nullified, as if it never happened at all. This applies to all types of abilities, from the mundane to the cosmically powerful. A prime example of this is his encounter with a Jimu Najimi, a being with an estimated 12 quadrillion different abilities. These abilities encompass a vast range of powers, including dimensional transcendence, death manipulation, reality alteration, time manipulation, matter manipulation, ability negation, concept manipulation, mind control, speed manipulation, matter disintegration, and countless others. She even gave Kumagawa a set of abilities that created all fiction, which had the ability to control causality. Despite possessing such an overwhelming arsenal of powers, Ajimu was unable to defeat Ihiko, each time utilizing every ability at her disposal. This feat is achieved through Ihiko's ability to perceive attacks not as threats, but as mere phenomena interacting with his body. By not acknowledging an attack as an attack, he can effectively bypass its effects. That's not all. The attacks that hit him are also broken and can never return to normal, which basically means that he can reflect the attack back at the attacker, turning their own power against them. This applies to his physical strikes as well. When he attacks you, the damage inflicted upon you is irreversible, meaning it cannot be healed. Healing-based abilities, causality manipulation, reality manipulation, none of them will undo the damage Ihiko inflicts upon the body. For example, Kumagawa is all fiction that can delete any phenomena from the universe, including color, a person's existence, sound, his own damage, and death. Even that couldn't undo Ihiko's irreversible damage. Despite negation abilities being pretty powerful and broken in most stories, they aren't unbeatable, thanks to rules within the power system and limitations within negation itself. There are loopholes characters can use to bypass these negation abilities. Take Ren Yamashiro, for example. In the story Mato, there are objects called peaches that grant users unique abilities if they consume them, similar to devil fruits. Ren, unlike most characters, has multiple abilities, and one of these abilities is the power to negate and turn off the peach abilities of other users, as long as she looks at them. However, the one major weakness of this ability is that she can't negate innate abilities that certain characters were born with, or just natural parts of their existence. This is what I mean by loopholes. The negation isn't absolute, and there are certain technicalities, tricks, or rules in the power system you can use to bypass negation. Starting with anti-magic's weaknesses, Asta must be close to or on the level of the spell he intends to negate, otherwise he'll be blown to pieces. It seems that anti-magic scales with Asta's current strength at the time, and thus cannot negate the spell if Asta is many times weaker than it. So, the more powerful the spell, the more anti-magic Asta needs to produce. Second, anti-magic cannot negate any spell simply from touching it. There are many instances where a spell is touching the swords but don't get negated at all. This means that the anti-magic swords need to actually pierce or slice the spell for the nullifying effects to occur. But there are instances where this also isn't the case, as it nullifies the spell just from tapping on it. So, we might have to chalk this up to inconsistency from the author. And third, even when in devil mode, Asta can still be manipulated by other spells like mind control or feel the effects of an area's grand magic region. Well, anti-magic in general is easy to use but hard to master. Its potency relies on the user's hard work and ability to scale to an attack. The weakness, so no longer human, is that it can't outright negate supernatural forces. While yes, it's powerful against abilities are just one aspect of the supernatural forces in a Bungo Stray Dogs world. There are other supernatural powers that appear in the series, which technically isn't considered abilities, so Dazai is unable to nullify them. Imagine Breaker, on the other hand, has three weaknesses if you don't include it being restricted to the right hand. First, Imagine Breaker cannot nullify something that regenerates faster than it can negate, such as Inocantus. This will often require him to touch the spellcaster or an alternate source of the spell. Second, powers of a similar nature to Imagine Breaker, as in were born from the hopes and dreams of individuals, cannot be nullified. Third, if a spell somehow becomes considered natural to the world, Imagine Breaker won't register it as a supernatural phenomena, but besides that, there isn't really an upper limit to the types of spells it can nullify. Ihiko, on the other hand, doesn't really share any of these weaknesses. For example, a typical power negator like Toma or Dazai is still vulnerable to conventional weaponry like guns, bombs, and mortgages. But Ihiko's ability extends to physical weapons and damage as well, giving him more options overall. He doesn't need to scale to the level of the attack like Asta. His ability extends to multiple objects like rubber bands. It's not random in where it shows itself. You can't really trick the nature of the ability itself. Basically, it can pretty much do everything the others can do without a lot of the drawbacks. Imagine Breaker is most powerful of its counterparts, and it's shown the ability to nullify universe-wide spells on several occasions, but so has irreversible destruction. And unlike Imagine Breaker, it's not restricted to the right hand and can reflect the damage as well. Ihiko only has really one weakness to its negation, the attack has to be fresh, which is a way of saying there has to be something he's never encountered before. If an attack is fresh, that means Ihiko will acknowledge you, meaning you'll get damaged by an attack. There is one way you can achieve the concept of fresh, and that is through the power of language. If Ihiko is immune to anything he doesn't acknowledge, then that means you have to force him to acknowledge you. You have to talk to him to make him see you and your abilities as worthy of his time. That's where styles come in. Styles are a set of abilities using the concept of language, bending reality with a simple phrase, messing with words and their meanings, converting similes to metaphors, moving letters in a phrase to make a new word. There are many ways styles can be used. For example, there's contradictory conjunction, which basically lets people do the impossible by saying therefore. So basically, styles are a unique form of communication that mixes language with brute force power. Ihiko is a warrior, and violence is his language, so Medaka used her style to create a new attack that could communicate with Ihiko and convince him that our attack was indeed able to hurt him. This could be considered fresh, causing him to acknowledge her and allowing Medaka to damage him. This then carried it over to Zenkichi, who used contradictory conjunction to battle him for a time. However, there is one problem with this strategy, and that is if Ihiko simply chooses to close his heart to communication and not acknowledge it anyways, it won't work. So at most, a style can only be effective the very first time it's used, even if he lets you to begin with. Literally, the only way to defeat him is to redirect his own attack back at him. He acknowledges himself as strong, and his attacks are irreversible, meaning the only way you can truly hurt Ihiko is hurting himself. Plus, another issue is, once an attack is used on him once, it won't work the second time around. The only ability I mentioned beforehand that can foolproof hurt Ihiko is Imagine Breaker, since it's pretty much the concept of power nullification incarnate, and Ihiko's power can be considered a supernatural phenomena. Other than that, irreversible destruction may in fact be the strongest defensive ability I've personally seen in fiction, requiring a unique form of Takano Jutsu to bypass it. I don't know about you, but if you gotta put that much work into bypassing an ability like this, there's no way anyone could easily win against Lihiko under most circumstances, even if they were a god with 12 quadrillion abilities.